Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this WIOA Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's topic is increasing in the downturn economy with Jody Sue Kelly as our presenter. And just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. As a reminder, all participants on the webinar are in listen-only mode. If you have questions as the webinar proceeds, please post your question in the Q&A or chat box, and we will address them throughout, as well as at the end of the webinar. Another housekeeping thing that we need to go over is that this webinar is being recorded, and the presentation from today and the slides and handouts from today are all available on our website and on the Illinois WorkNet website, and the recording will be up within 48 hours. Tomorrow, each attendee will receive a follow-up email, which will include a survey asking you about today's webinar. If you could please provide feedback and suggestions you have to help improve our upcoming webinars, our professional development team would really appreciate it. And I will also put that survey link in the chat towards the end of the webinar. So if you have 5 minutes today while this webinar content is fresh in your mind, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. And then with that, I'm going to start us off with our beginning WIOA Wednesday polls, ones that we do every Wednesday. So if you're joining us, you are familiar with that. But first, we would just like to know where you're joining us from today. So where's your local area? Chicago, Northern Illinois, Central Illinois, Southern, and statewide. And we do apologize for the closed captioning being a little off right now. It's running through our presenter's computer, and so it will pick up her voice perfectly, but it doesn't pick up mine quite as well. So just bear with us for a little bit, and then it will pick up Jody's voice perfectly. All right, so we have a good span sprinkled across the state this morning, joining us mostly from the Chicago and Northern area, but we also have some from Central and Southern Illinois as well. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. And then one more poll before we get started with our presenter today is just which partner do you best represent? Okay, so we have most of us are from Title I this morning, which is great, and a few others from the other WIOA partners and stakeholders. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're really excited to learn about this great content from our presenter today. So I'm going to hand it off to her, Jody Sue Kelly.
Great, thanks. So hi everyone, I am Jody Sue Kelly. I'm from Signet Associates. I'm actually sitting right now in Annapolis, Maryland. So I've been in workforce for 42 years, and I do a lot of on-site training as well as, during COVID, lots of webinars for workforce development professionals. So I have, in reference to this particular topic, I've personally taught job search workshops. I've created a job search curriculum that covers job search and job retention. And I've done my fair share of job development over the years, trying to convince employers to hire people who had dropped out of high school without a diploma, and most of which had involvement in the criminal justice system. So it was a bit of a hard sell, but did that as well. Although this isn't part of my business, but something that we're going to be talking about today, I guess because I have expertise in it, I've helped lots of family, lots of friends of friends, and sometimes strangers and others create high quality job search tools so that they can get a job. People all the way from like school superintendent, architects, engineers, recently a court administrator who was trying to be a court administrator for federal court in Baltimore, just make their way through that job search process. But I also work with people who are entry level, again, because of friends, because of family, et cetera. It's not really part of what I do, but like I do it to be a nice person. Anyway, with the downturn in the economy, the pressure is really on to increase placements and in many states, just to move people off of unemployment insurance. So to increase placements, it seems to me that there are two basic approaches. I mean, there are lots of different ways that you can go with this, but one is to increase the skills of those who are looking for jobs on their own, or, I mean, with some level of staff direction, of course, but, and the other side is to increase the outreach to employers to identify opportunities for our participants. Today, given the amount of time that we have, I'm going to focus on the left side of the page, how to increase the skills for those people who are looking. I did send a file in advance, and I think that Kirsten just put it in chat. You are going to need a paper copy, not of the overheads, not of the PowerPoint, but I think it's maybe 5 pages. It's a Word document. You will need to have that in front of you in order to do a couple of the activities that we're going to do. So my agenda is I put up, like in September, I taught a year-long course to workforce development professionals, all through webinar, once a month webinar, but on helping job seekers to fine-tune their job search tools and as well as other efforts, and to try to help the people that we place retain their jobs in a more effective way. Anyway, I had 133 professionals, so it was not at all a small sample. And in the course of the year, staff had to submit to me, almost as homework, like samples of job search tools that their customers had created, resumes, cover letters, job search logs, etc. And what I saw in that were very classic mistakes that I thought were costing these job seekers opportunities. So based on what I saw over the last year, I thought an effective use of our time today would be to focus on 3 specific areas of job search. There's a whole lot more, obviously, that we could search on, but job seekers, in my mind, have to really up their game to be competitive for jobs when, and to decrease their time on unemployment when the unemployment rate is so high, because that means there is lots of competition for the few jobs that exist. So what I want to do is give you techniques to use with your participants to help them to understand the process. What I find is oftentimes, even at like the court administrator level and these engineers and architects that I've helped personally, is that job seekers have a hard time thinking beyond themselves. And what they really need to do is think about this whole job search process from the employer's point of view. So that's what I want to give you some tools. The things that we're going to play in some of the activities, you actually can print the PowerPoints. You probably need to make some local adaptations, but you can use these activities with your participants. So why is this all so important right now? It's basically lots of people are out of work, as you know, lots of people are applying for jobs because like right now, unemployment's about to run out for millions of people the end of December, unless Congress does something. Lots of people are willing to take jobs below their skill level and their salary requirements just to have a job, which also increases pressure, and employers are inundated with applicants. So during these periods of high unemployment, your participants have to even be more competitive. So let's jump in. And I was going to have you use chat, but this is going to take too much time. But I do want you to take a pen and paper. Promise me that you're doing that. I can't see you, you can see me, but I do want you to write down some answers and see how you do. So to improve your chance of getting a job, how much time will an employer on average spend looking at a resume? Write down your answer for yourself. Ready? Well, the answer is 7 seconds. So that's it. So I want like my participants to understand, my job seekers to understand that we spend hours, you spend hours, I spend hours on my own resume, if not days, crafting a resume to send to an employer, and an employer is going to spend very little time looking at them to sort who's in the reject pile and who's going to get a second, more careful look. So a study by a company called The Ladders said that recruiters even spend less. They spend 6 seconds. I'm not going to quibble over the second. We just want to say that the client's resume had better pop out in order to get attention. And what I find from, again, all these homework exercise, 133 that I've seen, is very few are popping out. Let's look at another question I want you to answer, and that is, what percentage of resumes that are submitted to a job are screened out? What percentage, so they don't get an interview, they don't go any further in the process? Write it down. And now let's see how you did. Because the question becomes, how do you make your 7 seconds count? How can we get our clients' resumes to stand out so employers will focus? Well, the percentage of resumes that are submitted that get screened out, 98%. So what happens, what I think happens, is to very motivated people, it's debilitating. It's like they apply and they apply and they apply and they don't get called for an interview. And if I don't get called for an interview and I keep applying, I start getting depressed and I start losing my enthusiasm. And it actually makes it easier to not apply, because if I don't apply, what's the use? I wasn't going to get called anyway. And so it almost becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. So let's look at quickly, how can you get your interview, or your resume rather, noticed? So here's what it's a little test, and look at these. Again, you can write this down on your own. I normally have you use chat, but we're using the different form of the webinar platform. So 7 seconds, if you're an employer and you're getting these resumes and you're only going to spend 7 seconds, which would you pick? A, on the left, or B, on the right? On the face of it, which of these two resumes jump out at you more? And I'm going to guess that, like me, you're going to say it's the one on the right. This, by the way, is a real resume. This is my niece, my great niece, Brittany. Brittany is a high school senior, and because she's going to college next year or so we believe, it depends on, I guess, what happens to COVID, she wanted to get a job during the school year, so she could save money to buy things, I guess, for her dorm room. Anyway, she sent me her resume, which is on the left, and I spent just a little bit of time on it, probably about less than an hour, and created the one on the right. I think far more likely to get attention. I will say she did get the job. She got a job at the bakery at a little grocery store. So A versus B. So visually, it's, forget the content, I know you can't read it, just visually it looks a lot more interesting. My other niece recently applied for a job, Amberly, and she is was applying for assistant manager at Columbia, and she sent me and asked me if I would like help her update it or look it over or whatever. And when I returned it to her, it again was on the B side. So if you have 7 seconds, which is going to grasp your attention. I mean, remember, a resume is a marketing brochure about the job seeker. It needs to look appealing, and many resumes are just dense and boring. They're not going to pass this 7-second test. And if you just take 1 second to look at this, I want to point out, and again, I do not assume that you can read, you don't need to read very much on this. I wanted you to get the visual idea, not be reading the content. But if you will look at this on Amberly, notice her education. She went to Waynesburg University. You can probably read that. Anyway, she graduated in May of 2002. And I'm thinking, education, here's a classic mistake that people do. she got her education, her undergraduate degree 18 years ago. My question is, why is that first? Why did she put that first on the resume? Obviously, what's going to be more important to Columbia to be an assistant manager is her current work experience at Columbia. Notice on her resume down here toward the bottom, she has a student library assistant from 2000 to 2002. Yes, she did that. Notice that gets 5 lines in the resume. How many lines did the Columbia, her current job that she's been doing for 12 years, how many lines did that get on the resume? 5. Yeah, 5 lines. And so if what you're applying for, like to me, that's a total imbalance. You'll see on my version, I've given her, I didn't count them, 15 lines, and I don't even talk about the library assistant because it's not relevant for that particular job. Another point that I'll quickly make is the bulleted list is far faster to scan than forcing a reviewer, a resume reviewer who's only going to use 7 seconds to have to read paragraphs and sentences. So the bulleted list. So on the face of it, it's not a bad, her resume wasn't bad, but it, when you take a closer look, it needs an overhaul. So what I want to just show you very quickly is where you get the template. Some of you already know this, but if you go to Word and you go to a new file and you go to cover letter, or you enter cover letter in the search box and you click on that magnifying glass, then you're going to get these templates. I use Word templates all the time for proposals, announcements, invitation, both personally as well as professionally. But this is the page that you would land on. Notice that you're going to get resume templates and cover letter templates. And if you scroll down, there are even more. I didn't put them all on here. What I did cross off the one with the picture. That's because in the United States, it caused all kind of legal issues to include a picture. Employers don't want to see. In European countries, it's actually customary to include a photo on your resume. But in the USA, you wouldn't unless the person wanted to be a model, an actress, a TV personality, because a person's look is not part of the job requirements. Anyway, I think like with Brittany and with Amber, what I did was I went to the templates and made them look a hell lot better. So that's the first thing. It just visually, it has to be appealing. First point. Secondly, the resume needs to be customized. We tell people all the time, you need to customize, customize, customize. But the question to me is, how do I teach that? Too many people want to do one resume. I see it all the time. And even the ones that I got from my 133 students, you could tell it's a one size fit all resume. They're going to send that same resume out to 100 employers. And that forces employers to try to read between the lines to figure out if the applicant is a good fit, right? And employers aren't going to spend that much time. Employers don't read that far. If the applicant does not address what the employer has spent all this time and money posting, then the applicant's not going to be as competitive as the applicant who spent the time addressing all the needs that the employers has expressed. So one size does not fit all. People can have like one master resume. Like my niece, if she was going for a library assistant job, then I'd pull that right back out and use it, or was going to work at a university, I'd pull it back out. But for what she's doing right now, it's not relevant. So the thing that I find is that customizing a resume doesn't even take that much time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, if the jobs are in the same field. So let's look at how you customize so that you can train your job seekers on the concept. So I need you to pull out the activity, the papers that I ask you to print. And you're going to pull out, there's one that is a job description. It's for HVAC. And what I want you to do, and I'm only going to give you like 5 minutes to do this, if that, you're going to read that job description. And what I want you to do is you're going to read the job description so that you know what the employer is looking for. I might have shortened it a bit for you. Then you have two, in that packet, there are 2 applicants. One is Miguel, one is Michael. And both have a cover letter and both have a resume. what I see is that, um, or this form is also in that packet. And when I work with a lot of, or have done webinars and, or actually on-site workshops for employers. When employers, especially large employers like hospitals, universities, county governments, state governments, when they're hiring employees, they have like a system. Some small employers don't, but it's that they will list, as I've done here on this sheet, all of the qualifications for the job, what is in that ad. And in the HVAC ad, you'll see 3 years experience. They have to be able to start up and troubleshoot furnaces, like everything that the employer mentioned. And then what what an employer will do is they evaluate the resumes, they score them. So in our little activity, you're going to score the resumes just the way an employer would. A 0 means I don't see any evidence in the cover letter or the resume that like Miguel or Michael have 3 years of experience. If you don't see that, you give them a 0. If it's sort of implied that they need it, but it's not specifically mentioned in the resume or the cover letter. So you'd have to read between the lines in order to make that, it's basically an assumption. You'll give them a 1. And if the person clearly says it, states it in the cover letter, I have 3 years experience, or it's in the resume with dates that I have 3 years of experience, and you're going to give them 2 points. And so there's only 8 items. And what I want you to do is go through, read the resumes, read the cover letters, and then go through and score. When you're finished doing that quick activity, which I think will only take you minutes, I want you to write done in chat so that Kirsten can tell me that it's time to move on.
Jody, while we're waiting for them to participate in this activity, we did have one question that came through. Rose said, I was always told by our employment team to only use standard resumes, meaning to not use any of these graphic templates with color. What style should I use?
Graphic ones with color. The thing is that as I was teaching this class and got all these resumes that came in, again, 133, and I get tons of them that from personal, family, and friends. The things that I see is that I think that oftentimes what we are doing is we are teaching resume writing from the 1980s, not from 2020. Like, things have changed, things have advanced, and we're still teaching techniques and strategies that worked like 20 years ago, and we have to update that. And like Amber, I can tell you this, on the assistant manager position at Columbia Sportswear, she sent in her resume, the one that I had updated for her, and it had lots of, the color, if I scrolled back and showed it to you. When she was interviewed, the person doing the interview for her, which was a district manager, told her of all the resumes that this person had received, that Amber's was by far, hands down, the best. And by the way, she ended up getting the job. The district manager said that she was going to be soon retiring, and wanted to know whether or not Amber would help her to write and improve upon her own resume. Because of course, Amber didn't tell her, oh, my Aunt Jody did that. So I think she thinks she would get the district managers, she'd send it to me, I'd make the changes, and Amber would again pretend. In the class that I taught, people made the changes to make the better resumes more colorful, and that's anecdotal, but I think that they were pleased with the response that they were getting in terms of getting their customers' place. I don't buy the whole thing of, it's a brochure, it's a marketing brochure. And, if you can, I think you can do overkill, but it's having some basic color and something that visually pops out is going to get attention. So let's move to 2020. Everybody done with the activity? How are people doing there?
Yes, we have gotten a lot of dones.
Okay, good. Great, great, great. So,
We did have some more questions kind of alluding to
oh,
that, though. I don't know if you want to
okay,
wait or touch on them.
okay. No, 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 go ahead.
Okay, so Linda said, it's more of a comment. She said, many of the applicant tracking systems I've worked with don't read all the information in text boxes. So it might make sense to upload a plain resume and then attach the templated one. And then here's some questions. Lisa said, doesn't it depend upon the industry the applicant is applying to? Many employers frown upon resumes that are as graphic and colorful as the ones presented here. I think, I mean, alluding to that question, Jody, and you can touch on that a little bit more, but as someone who is a young professional from our center, and I recently started with our center in March, which was 2 weeks prior to the pandemic hitting. So I was, applying for multiple jobs. I did use a color format that was similar to the examples that Jody is sending. I think it depends on the kind of position you're applying for, but the position that I applied for in my role that I have here at our center is online marketing coordinator, and that's a creative position. So I wanted my resume to exemplify that. So I think you can use some autonomy
Right,
with
and
what you're saying.
I agree, and I think that you have to use judgment. But what I think is just the flat resumes can use, like there are things that you can do that are still interesting in terms of format, that maybe don't have all the color. Although, like as I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I think that like my brother applied for HVAC and then applied for general maintenance at a nursing, or not a nursing home, but it's a senior living facility, and they need somebody to do maintenance in the apartments. And what we had to do with his, because I mean we have the nice graphic one, that actually what we did was we mailed, but we had to cut and paste in order to get it onto Indeed.com because they had a specific format. So in that case, like I agree, like that you can't, what he took, when I said he mailed it, he actually didn't mail it. He took it with him to the interview. But the concepts that we're looking at right now with Miguel and Michael were definitely true, where it was a customized resume, but that is without the graphics. So yeah, I think you have to use judgment. But what I think is that I shouldn't have 100% of my clients who have no color, nothing that's visually appealing, nothing that stands out, because there might be a few employers that that would react in a negative way. So I just don't want to go off on because we could spend the entire time that we have just on that. But I've seen in the class that I taught, even with truck drivers, where they just had a little icon of a truck at the top. So it wasn't like an overwhelming amount of color, but there was still something that was graphically related. And one was for a barber, and they had like a barber pole that went down the side. So I think that there are creative things. Do I think that that is, like what I'm looking at, always is looking at, is how do I get my 7 seconds? So I'm gonna move to this because I don't want to just spend all of our time on the graphic. If it works, it works. What I'm saying is let's move to the current year. So anyway, when you look at Miguel and Michael, who got, if you tallied up the score, who got the highest score? And my guess is going to be, if you were putting this on chat, that it's Michael. What did Michael do in this, in his cover letter and his resume that Miguel did not do? And I think again, were we able to chat? The answer would be that Michael, my guess is, and again, we're not in person, so you can you could differ on a number or two because everybody's going to evaluate things. But the way in which I wrote it, Michael probably got 2s in every category because every box was checked. He had 3 years experience. He says he started up in troubleshot furnaces. And Miguel didn't address all of those things because Miguel was more or less is a one-size interview or one-size resume fit all. So when I look at Miguel, and if you look at your numbers, pick an area where he got you gave him a 0 or you gave him a 1. The question becomes, how much time would it have taken Miguel to make the changes that would have given Miguel a 2? And the answer that I see is, or that I feel is that it would have probably taken 10 or 15 minutes at most to be able to insert 3 years experience or have start up and troubleshoot furnaces, air handlers, or I have the ability to train other entry-level personnel. And so what happens is Michael ends up looking like the perfect fit and Miguel doesn't, even though Miguel could very well have all of the experience that that employer is looking for. So here is a tool that I use with my participants, or when I say my participants, even the people, the court administrator, the architects, the engineers, etc. I have a form, this I've stuck on a PowerPoint, so I want you to picture it's a full page. Here's how I teach people how to customize their cover letters and resumes. I make them list every credential and every asset, every skill, every requirement on the left-hand side that is listed in that advertisement. And then as we're either writing the resume or the cover letter, or maybe they've already written it, they already have one that they're showing me, we will check off and make sure that they've covered each of those skills or qualifications or requirements, so that we can make sure that every single thing is covered. So it's, I think that this is a technique where you can show them the concept. You could do it with their own ad. They bring you an ad, or they tell you where to find it, or maybe they email it, and we're going to list every skill and requirement that the employer has asked for, and then we're going to double check their resume and their cover letter to make sure that they are a perfect fit, hand in glove. And so I find that this tool helps bring home that concept of how you customize. So instead of just saying we've got to customize it, we're showing them the how. So that's very quickly on resumes, so much more that you can say, but I do want to cover cover letters, because one of the things that I heard in my class was that a lot of people don't write cover letters, or don't want to write cover letters, because they have a belief that most employers won't read them. So it's just a waste of time. But what I want you to picture is this. Before you go on a job interview, say that you have a job interview and you go out and you buy yourself a brand new pair of pants, and you spend 2 hours out shopping, looking for the perfect pair of pants, trying things on, putting them back, trying on something else. Then before you go to the interview, you iron the pants to make sure that they look sharp. And so you spend a lot of time and a lot of money on these pants. Well, it is, and then you wear them to the interview. Well, it's probably true that the employer will not notice that you have on a brand new pair of pants, but the employer will definitely notice if you show up with no pants on. So the same can be said with cover letters. Maybe the employer will read it, maybe they won't, but they will notice if the applicant doesn't bother to send one. So by not writing the cover letter, the participant is robbing him or herself of an opportunity to express things that can't be captured in the resume. who the applicant is as a person, why the applicant wants this particular job, why the applicant respects this particular company. So these are the sort of details that can make or break the applicant's shot at the job, especially if they're being weighed against people with very, very similar credentials like Miguel and Michael. Plus, I think that writing a cover letter is a good way to refine their thoughts to help them prepare for the interview. So let's look at the numbers, because cover letters aren't exactly fun to write. So again, it's tempting to look for reasons not to write them. But if you take a quick look at the numbers, basically 1 out of 4 recruiters say they actually read them and consider them to be important. And so I want to emphasize that this was a study that was done on recruiters. Many companies that we place people at don't actually have recruiters, they're business owners. And business owners are more likely to read the cover letters than a recruiter. The smaller the company, the more important that cover letter will be. Another study showed that 56%, or 6 out of 10, basically want the applicant to attach a cover letter to the resume. So the applicant is taking a risk if they don't write one. Career Builders did a study and found that about half of all recruiters consider cover letters the second best method to give your resume a boost. The first best method to give your resume a boost is to customize it, just like I showed you. So here's the thing: hiring managers do like resumes based on the numbers. They get the applicant noticed. They show that the applicant has gone the extra mile, which shows initiative and demonstrate that the person really wants the job. So I think that they can give the applicant the edge. But to write a cover letter and to write a resume, both. As a matter of fact, when people come over and they ask me, like, will you help me write my resume? Will you help me write my cover letter? I want to apply for jobs. The first thing I make them do is, like, don't even come over to the house. Like, don't even talk to me. And some of it now I'm doing on web because of COVID. But like, I can't do it. I can't help you unless you have a job description, because if what we're going to do is customize the cover letter, customize the resume, and we're not going to do the one size fit all, I have to have something to build upon, and that's going to be this job description. So when to write a good cover letter, they have to have the job description that outlines all the assets and qualifications, so we can see which side are we going to put it on. And it seems to me that if a job seeker is not gonna, if they have no interest in personalizing their cover letter, and they just want a one size fit all cover letter, that's almost as bad as a one size fit all resume. It's almost like, then why spend, how much do you want this? Like, if you're not going to spend the extra half hour to do something that is going to be quality, again, because there's lots of competition out there right now. So here's an example of how to customize based on a job posting. So I did medical assistant. We're seeking, this is real. I don't make any of this up because frankly, I'm too lazy. We're seeking a medical assistant who is friendly, well-spoken, and can multitask in a fast-paced environment. That's in the ad. So what's going to be in the cover letter? I am friendly and enjoy engaging with people of all walks of life. So you expand that. I have developed conversational skills and can relate well to patients, which again goes to their well-spoken, and I can multitask in a fast-paced environment. I recognize that in a medical office, days can be long, hectic, require multitasking. I'm up for the challenge. People struggle with cover letters because they don't know what to say. And so what I want to draw the connection for them is, if you go right back to the ad tells you what to say in the cover letter. I think it's that simple. And when I can show people how it is, where it is that we're trying to move to, then I can get the job seeker to help me to create something, well, really, I'm coaching them to do it themselves, a better cover letter and a better resume. So one problem that I see in working with folks is that one problem is people start writing cover letters and they start writing resumes before they've even gathered all the raw material. So again, my key question to people is not like, do they have a resume? It's, do they have a job posting that they'd like to apply for? Because that to me is the ground floor. That's the starting place. You know, and I don't know if it's like lack of knowledge of how the process works. I don't know, but what I do know is that preparation and gathering all the information that you need is really critical. Like, I think about it, it's like if I'm going to paint a room, if I'm going to do gardening, sewing, do a home repair, or even like, you know, cook a simple meal, the first step is preparing. It's gathering all the tools, making all the preparation. Then it's going to go much faster without a lot of muss and fuss. If you don't prepare first, then you're constantly starting and stopping, and I think people end up cutting corners. So one of the things that I think is important is to help people before they write a resume or cover letter to gather all the information. I'm not going to show you all of the, I mean, you could put together a master form that has all this information that they need to gather that that I can hand to people as sort of the preparation. I'm only going to show you pieces of it just in the interest of time. Professional email address, obviously. Job descriptions for jobs in the field, where they want to end up. I want everything that they've done in terms of their education and training. So I'm going to have a sheet on that. Tell me everything, even if you think it's not relevant. I don't care on the next one whether or not it's like you took a class in like first aid, CPR, you took something in water safety. I don't care, and I don't care if it has nothing to do with the job. I want to know everything so that we can pick and choose any other credentials that they have. Their marketable skills, like what are the things that we're going to sell to the employer, their work history, job duties. The accomplishment list I am going to show you because I think people struggle with that, my own experiences, and then obviously any volunteer unpaid work. So if you can picture that there's like data gathering, a page for each one of these. I'll go through a couple really quickly, some quick highlights. And that is just the email address. I mean, I know that we've all heard email addresses that, or people have email addresses that they shouldn't use. The thing that I want to show you here is like on the left side, those all look fine to me. On the right, not so good. Anna, 1990, you might wonder why, because that actually tells me her age. Why would somebody put 1990? She's probably 30 years old, and employers that's giving out too much information. Hot mama, obviously not. Doobie 911 or Sportsaholic, like all of those things. And again, like I was making correction on those 133. I think this is so basic, but I was saying this person needs to get a different email address. So that does become problematic, not to spend too much time there. If somebody has no experience in the field, I saw a lot of resumes, education like medical assistant or phlebotomist, that they had a certificate. If they have no experience whatsoever, I actually would go back on, look up the school that they said they went to, find out what courses you had to take so that I can add those, so that it adds the element that it seems that you know more. It almost replaces, well, it doesn't totally replace, but you get the idea. It says that you do have some experience in this. So you want to add those. So I just use phlebotomist and truck driving here, saying defensive driving, road safety, all of that, instead of saying I have a CDL. So if you have no experience, go back, look at the actual classes. Gather job descriptions for past jobs. This is from Dollar General. So when somebody's done something, I make them go back, like, tell me exactly what you did. I even saw this with Amber. I've seen it with Brittany, my younger niece. Like Brittany worked at a deli and she made sandwiches. That was last year or last summer. And when I said, like, what do you do? She can't, it should be like, I serve customers. Like, and so I went back, looked at a sandwich shop, looked at the duties that you would do. And I said, like, let's like put a check mark beside all of these things that you think that you have experience doing. So basically what I'm saying is a lot of people can't remember what they've done, or they only pick like 3 things that they do, or they don't know how to word it. So I look it up, exact replica of that job on Indeed, and then we're going to put check marks so that I know what we can drag over to the interview. Don't work hard, work smart. Find something to help jog their memory. Finding accomplishments is the thing I really struggle with people, helping them to think this through. Job seekers, I can send them the questions and they can think about these, or I can ask them and help them think through what makes you special. This is really hard for most people. It's like pulling teeth, or I feel like I'm acting as a detective, but I have to get them to not only tell me about the job, but tell me like what you did that was an accomplishment or a little extra. So did you train other workers, or did you resolve, like, did you have a really challenging service issue? I've asked this to architects a million times, like, tell me a project that you worked on that had some real challenges in terms of getting this project built. And some would tell me about like, well, it was, in an area that had flooding, so you had to deal with that, or maybe it was a zoning issue. Tell me something that you've done that makes you a cut above. So I've given you a bunch of questions. And again, you can get them to think about this, or you can use this as a way to prod them. So then the reason that we want to do that, obviously, is because we, in the resume, I don't want to write about duties. I want to write about accomplishments. And this is, again, where I spend a lot of time, but let's look here. Somebody said that they were a cashier at the Target department store. And look at what they wrote. They ran a cash register. And I think from an employer, if I see that you were a cashier at Target, I already get that you ran a register. I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, they made you run a register. Took money, credit cards, checks, balanced the cash drawer, asked customers if they wanted paper or plastic. Really? You're going to put this on your resume? And I know you're thinking like, oh, Jody just made this up. I don't make up anything. I am way too lazy. This is the kind of thing that I find like comes through: scanned items, bagged items. So I did a rewrite, and here's my rewrite: delivered fast, friendly service to Target customers, handled 250 to 300 customers at checkout per shift. How do I get that? By interviewing the person, finding out like, well, like how busy was this? Busy, like how many people, collected cash, checks, credit card payments. At what accuracy? 99.9%. If you look at A and B, I'm an employer. I want to interview the B person, not the A person. The A person, like, I already know that. People who were housekeepers at a hotel will go like made beds. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I already know that. What else did you do? And maybe it's that I met my production goals, cleaning so many rooms in so many hours. So what I think is that we've got to work with people on getting the resumes into the accomplishment arena, because that's who employers want to hire, especially, again, when it's competitive. So bottom line, creating effective job search tools really can make a difference. And so what I want us to turn to then is, now let's look at the other big screening tool that employers are going to use, and that is going to be interviews. The biggest, when you think about it, like, employers are really risk averse, and that's why they screen resumes. That's why they're going to look at cover letters. Sometimes they do a telephone screening because they don't want risk. They don't want to hire somebody who is not a good fit. I don't want to have to fire people. I don't want to have to lay people off because that actually increases my unemployment tax. So that when you look at it, the 3 biggest risks that employers take are: 1, that you're really not qualified for the job. So they're going to ask you questions about your skills and qualifications. 2, they take a risk that maybe you're going to be difficult to get along with. Maybe you have the skills and qualifications, but you're like not going to be a good fit with other employees. You won't fit in with the team, or people just won't like working with you. You're hard to get along with. And the third risk they take is that if they hire you and they train you and they finally get you to a place that you are productive, then you'll quit or leave. And I have to start this whole process all over again. And for most employers, honestly, they don't like hiring. It's not like part of the thing that they want to do. It's something that they have to do, but it doesn't bring joy to their life. So employers hate risk. So they're going to use, obviously, you guys know this, they use the interview to weed out people, as well as to identify the ideal candidate. So in order to help your customers prepare for the job interview, there are a few things that need to be on their list of things for them to do. Definitely, before they go to the job interview, they need to review that job order again, so it is fresh in their mind, so that they know exactly what the employer is looking for. They need to anticipate questions. You can read, I mean, all of you are probably expert at this. I definitely think that I'm above average. I can read a job description and I can predict with a fair degree of accuracy what you're going to be asked in the interview, because what they write in the job posting, of course, is the things that they're concerned with. So you're going to need to prepare answers to common questions. Do you have the skills for the job? Are you going to be a good fit and a good member of the team? And are you going to stay if I hire you? Because those are the three biggest risks that employers take. And then for tougher questions, like if somebody's job hopped, what's going to, like, how are you going to respond to that if you're asked? Have you ever been fired? How are you going to respond to that? Or have you ever had some type of conflict on a job? And obviously people need to practice and practice some more. So in order, like what I'm saying with the job resume, with the cover letter, with the job interviews, the core of preparation is always coming up with a job description, having a job order, so that we know very, specifically what it is that we're writing to. So again, we're not doing the one size fit all. Here's the issue that I see in all of that. And here's an activity that you could actually do with your participants that we'll spend a little bit of time doing here. So oftentimes in programs, well, let me back up. Employers are not very creative in terms of what they ask in job interviews. I mean, some are, they'll say, if you could be an animal, what would you be? But if you go online, you can find worksheet after worksheet, website after website that will say, here are the 50 most frequently asked questions in job interviews, or here are the 100 most frequently asked questions in a job interview. And oftentimes what we've done is we've had job seekers and we give them a worksheet of, here are these frequently asked questions, and we tell them, review this list and think about how you'll answer these questions, because these are the questions that you're likely to be asked in any interview that you go to. And I'm telling you, even for me, that task is too overwhelming. Like if I give somebody a list of, here are the 50 questions that you need to prepare for in order to go onto a job interview, 50 is so overwhelming that if I gave them a sheet with, 50 questions on it, what do they end up doing with it? Maybe they scan it quickly, but I think that most people then put it on like the kitchen counter, put it on the, side of the table, put it on the side of the desk. It's so overwhelming a task, even if they start and they look at the first 3 or 4, they're not going to study those 50 questions. So, and anytime that someone's interviewing for a job, their stress level goes through the roof. I want them to feel like less stressed and more relaxed. I even think of like interviews I've gone on, or when I had to defend a proposal that I wrote, it is like, it's nerve-wracking. So the real challenge to me is, how do I shrink down those 100 most frequently asked questions or the 50 most frequently asked questions into something that is much more manageable and less scary for the participant? So we're going to do a short activity that helps us to break this down into a more manageable activity, and is hopefully is done in a meaningful way to get our job seekers prepared. Because here's what I look at. There's 100 questions or 50 questions, depends on what website you go to. But in the end, if you really can winnow those down and you think about categories, there aren't 50 questions, there aren't 100 questions. There are really only 3 questions that you're being asked on an interview. Before I show you what those are, think about this. Now, again, I would have you use chat, and we'd be able to, I guess I could do that. You could put it in chat. But employers, because they're not very creative, if you go to multiple interviews, you yourself, it is very likely that you have been asked the same question by several different employers. And my question is, if you can think about this for yourself, can you think of one question that you've been asked at more than one job interview? And if you want to, or if something comes to mind, you can put it in chat and Kirsten can read it to me.
We have tell me about yourself coming in.
Tell me about yourself, exactly.
Why should I hire you? Why do you want to work here?
Yep, why should I hire you? Why do you want to work here?
What are your strengths? What makes you a good candidate for this job?
Exactly. What are your weaknesses?
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
The 5-year question. Which well, no, I'm not going to tell you that yet.
Why should I hire you? How do you deal with difficult people? How do you handle adversity?
Yep, or another version of that same thing is, tell me about a conflict that you've had at a prior job and how you handled it. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, and those questions could still come in, but like we can all see, we've been asked these things over and over and over again. You don't know exactly which set you're going to get, but employers are just not very creative. I think they go on the same websites that we go on and look at, like, what would be some good questions to ask. So what I find is it's very difficult for our participants to memorize answers to every question that may be asked. So it's helpful to help them to figure out what the employer is really asking, because that way they're going to get a much better idea of how to answer the question. So here's what I see is that, because memorizing these answers is too hard, let's reduce the questions to only 3. And then I'll show you an activity, or I'll give you, we're going to play the little activity that I help bring this point home. Here are, so one of the questions that they're going to ask is, are we going to like working with you? Are you going to be a good fit here? And what does that go back to? One of the questions that you guys even put, which is, how do you handle adversity? Or what I said, tell me about a conflict that you've had and how you've handled it. That's all of those are questions in the category of, are we going to like working with you? Another question that people or employers are going to ask are, do you have the skills and qualifications to do the job? So they'll say, tell me about your prior work experience. Can you talk a little bit about your education? Can you talk about the vocational training that you've had? In your past job, you said that you did X. Can you tell me a little bit about like, how you did X. So do you have the skills and qualifications to do the job? And actually, my experience has been, because they've already reviewed the cover letter, they've already reviewed your resume, they already have a good idea if you have the skills and qualifications to do the job. That's not to say that they're not going to ask you questions in that area. They will, but it's far fewer than what they're likely to ask in the other categories. And the last question is, are you going to stay if we hire you? Or are you going to quit soon thereafter? So an example of that, which you guys actually said, would be like, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? What I want to hear is, are you going to still be in this field? Is this just like a temporary place that you're landing until you can move on to somewhere else? Another one, are you going to stay if we hire you? It would be like, tell me about why did you leave your last job? Because what I'm trying to do is figure out whether or not you're going to do that same thing here. So what I want you to do is, I gave you some interview questions, and I told you to cut them into strips. So you should have a dozen, I think, questions that are cut into strips. And what I want you to do is, I want you to read the question. You'll pull those out now. And I want you to read each of the questions. And what I want you to do is put the question into the pile that you believe is the real question. What is the question behind the question? So do you, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? I would put in the retention pile. Tell me how you've handled a conflict. I would be likely to put in the, are we gonna like working with you pile? So go through, and I want you to, I'll shut up, and I want you to put those into categories. And write done when you finished with that.
Okay, while we're waiting for everyone to participate, someone asked, where will the recording be available? The recording will be available on our website. I can put that in the chat. I've put it in there at the beginning of the session, but I'll re-put it in there just as a refresher. And then it will also be available on the Illinois WorkNet website as well within 48 hours of today. So you can access that recording. We did have a couple questions coming through.
Okay.
Let's get to those. They're pretty quick. Questions. Do you feel that objectives are needed in a resume?
I think actually sometimes I will use them. It depends on what the job is, but I think a summary is better than an objective, like a summary about what your experience is, like an experienced, if we went back to the ad that I showed you earlier, an experienced HVAC mechanic with experience installing, I'd have to clean this up and make it sound better, but like with experience installing new as well as repairing old or retrofitting old systems, looking for, a new, new employer, new company to apply my skills. Like something that's more of a summary, because then I can tie that right back to what they've said in that ad, because what I want to do is be that perfect fit. What I find that most people do in objectives, and maybe that's why it just depends, but what I find most people do is they'll just write like, I'm looking for a challenging experience where I can grow and grow with the company. It's so vague that I don't think it's to me, it's a waste of space. Every single line on a resume has to be moving the argument forward, because employers aren't going to spend that much time reading them.
Great. So thank you, Jody, for answering that. We do have two questions that are kind of similar.
Okay.
The first one is, what if you don't have one or more of the skills, but you believe you'll be good at the job? And the second one says, what about if the skills are preferred but not required? Should that be included?
I'll give you one example. My brother, he was HVAC, maybe why I use that as an example. I'm drawn to them on Indeed.com. And he just decided he didn't want to do it anymore. So he wanted to do this maintenance thing for like this senior living facility. They have like 60 apartments, and he'd just be general maintenance, go around, fix windows, fix the AC if it needed it. But they said that he had to like take care of the grounds, and he had to have groundskeeping experience. He doesn't have any experience at that. And so like I was troubled by that, because it's like, oh my gosh, this is, and it's a big part of the job, like, because they own acres. And so what I ended up doing was I said that he lived on, that while he does not have, so he addressed it, while I do not have work experience as a groundskeeper, I live on a 7-acre property. It's in rural North Carolina. And, on that property, I have fruit trees, I have ornamental bushes, I have, hedges, blah, blah, blah. And I have to take care of those. Plus, I have, because he's also never worked maintenance he's just done HVAC. And before that, he was a truck driver. I said, like, he has 2 rental apartments. And so like he has had to do repairs on those. So I'll come up with something. Or if it says like must be whatever, something, have some kind of certification, and they don't have it, then I still am going to address it. I'll say, while I don't have the XYZ certification, should I get this job, I would immediately go for that certification. Or while I don't have my high school diploma, if it said that, I am, there are different ways of saying it, but like I am currently like attending or signing up to sit for my exam or whatever. It's like I try to come up with something. Like what I don't want to do is just totally ignore it. But what I want to be able to show is that I have some background, I can learn it, I'm willing to learn, I'm motivated, I have the initiative, like I saw it. So I try not to ignore. I mean, there are some jobs that like maybe they have like 20 qualifications where it goes on like page after page after page, and I can't address those. So like with this court administrator's job, that this guy, he actually had no experience with jury stuff, which it's a long story. But anyway, because they had so many of these qualifications, what I did was I grouped them and I made 5 categories. And then I made sure that we addressed each of the 5, but not every single requirement. So I try my best to come up with something, and sometimes that is creative writing.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jody. So we
Okay.
have a lot of questions. We have a lot of dones for the activity, but I want to
Okay.
ask this one more question before we move on.
Okay.
Should be a brief answer, but if the entry level positions do not ask for a cover letter, should we still ask participants to create one?
I'm going to, because like I said earlier, it makes you, first of all, what it does is it buys you more time to sell your to sell your skills, your qualifications, your motivation, you as a person. I also think that it shows motivation, it shows initiative. And so it gives you that one little like extra advantage over other people who are applying. And so it's like the example I said, the employer's not going to notice that you don't have your new pants on or that you have new pants on, but they are going to notice, you know, that somebody doesn't have a cover letter. So whether they read it or not, or read it carefully or not, yes, I'm submitting one. I think actually too, it's good experience. If what we're trying to do is teach people how to fish and not go fishing for them, give them a fish, then they should learn how to do this. This might be their might be the only opportunity that I have to teach them how to do it. And once you get the formula that I just am taking the ad and writing a letter around it, it's actually pretty easy to do. I don't have to be creative. I just see what they say and then I write that. So like expanding. Okay.
Perfect.
Is that it?
Yep. Well, there's a lot more.
Maybe there's going to be more, but yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so anyway, if you look at, if you've separated, well, first of all, let me step back and say here's a recommendation that I would give to you. I have like gone on and I've looked at those 50 most frequently questions or most frequently asked questions. And if you think about mailing labels, you know, return mailing labels, I've like typed those onto these return mailing labels, like in a Word document. And then I print it. So now I have a mailing label and each of those mailing labels has a different question on it. If you're following my picture or my visual, then I've gone to dollar store and I purchased like decks of cards. They're like 2 for $1. And then I'll take the mailing label and I peel the return mailing label with this question and put it on the cards. And then I've given those to, I taught high school seniors here in my own area. I volunteer at the school to teach high school seniors job search skills. And I give them decks of cards and they go through just what you guys did. With yours was strips of paper, but theirs are decks of cards and they're going, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And they're putting it into the pile. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Why should I hire you? And they're creating these piles, but it's through these decks of cards. So that's a really cheap, easy way of making a game out of this. Just like I've done, or you could do what I just did with you, strips of paper. And if you're working with clients virtually, I could send them that and ask them to do exactly what I asked you to do, cut them out. I only gave you 12 because in the interest of, or maybe it's 10, in the interest of time, I didn't give you all of those. But if I were really teaching you how to go on a job interview, oh, we're doing them all. Here's a question though, generally. Count how many cards you have in each pile and figure out in looking at like how many are we going to like working with you, how many are in the skills and qualification, how many are the if we hire you you're going to stay pile. My experience in like live training, and again I'm just going to cut that part, although you know we could chat, but my experience is most of the time the vast majority of questions are in the, are we going to like working with you? Are you going to fit in here pile? That is the thing. Like you can have all the skills and qualifications. Being a good fit is really, really critical because people do not want to hire people who they're going to have to end up letting go. So what they're really asking you about there is your work habits, your work attitudes, your ability to get along with others. And so they evaluated again your skills and qualifications when they read your resume and your cover letter. Some of the questions, my guess is that maybe you had a hard time. You're like, that could be that, or that could be skills and qualification. No, that could be, are we gonna like working with you type question. Here's the beauty of this activity. Is there's no right or wrong answer. You can put any question in any pile as long as, here's the point, as long as you formulate your answers to answer, like whether or not you have the skills and qualifications, whether or not you're going to fit in, and whether or not you're going to stay, then it doesn't matter what category that you put the question in. So if the question was, as an example, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I'm a job seeker, and I'm like, I know there's only 3 questions. And it's, are you going to fit in here? Do you have the skills and qualifications? Or are you going to stay? No matter how I interpret that, tell me a little bit about yourself. I could tell you all about my skills and qualification, and bingo, I've answered it in the correct way. If I took it as are you going to get along, and I answer it that way, bingo. It's one of the things that the employer wants to know. So it doesn't matter. What I really am trying to train my job seeker to do is every time that you are asked a question, it should be going into one of these 3 categories. By the way, my husband is the one who brings engineers and architects home. He brings them like cats, like dump, like dead chipmunks on your door. He brings unemployed architects and engineers. Why? Because he's an architect. And he was working for a company, and during a slowdown, they like laid off a bunch of their mechanical, electrical, as well as architects. So he was like, oh, my wife can help you. And he would bring them over. My husband is the one who would always say, Jody, make sure you tell them about the 3 questions, because people would want my resume help, my cover letter help, but they thought that they could just breeze through like an interview. And so when I started asking them, like, so what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Why'd you leave your last job? All of that, you could tell they were flubbing. I mean, they're trying to do it spontaneously. It wasn't working. My husband's always like, you need to show them these 3 questions. So, because I think that once you understand that there are only 3 questions, not 100 questions, not 50 questions, then that better helps you to prepare for the interview, because you only have to prepare answers for 3 questions. So, oh, I guess I already did that. So, so you only have to build answers for those 3 categories. So what I do with my people that I coach is they'll have 3 sheets of paper. Sometimes I'll just have 1 piece of paper, but it's 3 columns, and they need to build a bulleted list of things that they want to make sure that they cover in the interview, and it's in those 3 categories. What are your skills and qualifications? What do you want to make sure that you talk about? Sometimes the employers don't ask the question that you need as a basis to be able to like to espouse on, like something that you think is important to say. So I put it in this category so that no matter what you ask me, like I have my bulleted points of what I want to get across. Show me, prove to me, give me examples of how you can demonstrate that you are going to fit in as a member of our team. So tell me stories about that. So they're going to write those down, evidence of other ways that they worked in a team that they're going to be able to bring out at the interview, and to demonstrate that they're willing to stay or that they're going to retain. So now they have these 3 categories, they have the answers, and now no matter what you ask, what is asked, you know, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are, tell me a bit about yourself. What I'm training the job seeker to do is think about those 3 sets of questions, if that makes sense. Well, I'm about to open it up for questions, so if you have then you'll ask. So the key concept for us today, there is so much more. I know, I mean, I taught a year-long course, and this is an hour and a half, is during a downturn in economy, the job search is much more competitive. They have to have stronger tools. So I want to build the entire strategy around customizing, and that's the resume, the cover letter, and the interview questions and answers. And so with that, I will open it up for questions either on the activities or even anything that we didn't even talk about here. Kirsten?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions. Couple of them. Let me scroll back up here.
Well, while you're scrolling, I just want to say that what I was trying to also show you is like engaging activities that you can use to train your participants. So if they did the Miguel, or you can make it a different thing, it doesn't have to be HVAC, but you, like the thing that I think is what we want to do is we want the participant to, at least for a moment, think the way an employer thinks. So if I have them evaluating cover letters and resumes, they get it opens up their perspective. Oh my gosh, this is how they do it. This is what happens on the other side of the desk. The same with the cover letter fits right in there, but also with the interviews, it's that I'm showing them what we want to do is show them the employer's perspective. So many job seekers only think of things from their own perspective, and that's where they fall short. So you have to think exactly like the employer does, and that's how you're going to win.
Okay, Jody. So
Find it.
Chuck Jones would like to know, when it comes to the term overqualified and overdressing the quote, "will you stick around" issue, what do you recommend for tailoring the resume and interview to reconcile the applicant's experience to the position? Some employers are intimidated by applicants that have higher levels of education than required.
I think that and everything ends up being like it depends kind of answer, because as you can imagine, everything's going to be individualized because we're customizing for that employer. So if there is a way, like as an example, if I, who've been doing like training and technical assistance and consulting in the workforce field for 42 years, but let's say that I don't want to do what I'm doing anymore. And that's hypothetical because it's not true, but I decided that I just want to get a local job. That's what I want to talk about, is that, and lots of people, it's like that I moved up and I worked at this level, but what I found that I missed and what I really have a passion for is actually doing the work. Example, my husband now, he's an architect. He doesn't do any architecture. He's a supervisor. I mean, he's got a bigger title than that, but he's at the University of Maryland. He doesn't like draw drawings. He doesn't do measurements. All of the things that he loves doing is not what he does. He does personnel, hiring people, firing people, like sitting at big meetings. I mean, and so he's no longer doing what his passion is for. So I think that that's the area that you have to explain that in the cover letter. It's like that, while I have experience with X, like, I've done that, been there, done that, and that is not what my passion is. And so what I want to do is get back to the real work of whatever this thing is. Like, I know I don't want to be a dispatcher anymore. I want to get back in the truck. But there has to be an explanation, because Chuck's right. Otherwise they read through it and go, this person will never stay. And that becomes a problem. Or they could say that I guess, again, it depends on the situation. I must have to interview people to find out what their situation is so we can come up with an answer. But that that they worked at this higher level, they saved well, that they want to work because they want to work, but that they're willing at this point to trade a higher salary to be able to do work that they love. So that I think that it's like, because I understand that other level and I get that perspective of the higher level, I think that I will add even more value. So Chuck's right, you have to address it. But I think that depending on the situation, there are ways to be able to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to the Q&A here. Do you have a favorite resource to help us update our resume writing skills?
Yeah, the job training curriculum that I wrote. The thing that I find, yeah, I mean, I guess the real answer to that is at this point, no. The thing that I think, and that's what I was trying to do in this webinar, is that I think there's lots of just straight information about how you do it. You know, how to write a resume, and there are templates that you know, you can pull up and you can fill in. The thing that I see that people are missing is the concept, the vision of what it is that we're trying to do. So like the thing that I like, and because I found no resource for it, I created it myself, is like, how can I teach people something in an engaging way that gets participation, that forces them to sit in the role of being the employer? So, because once you understand like how, like I'll give you an example, one activity that I created, I'm just always thinking of like, what's on the other side of the desk? People had to fill out, people have to do online applications, or they have to do job applications. And oftentimes, like I find people write stuff they should never write, and like reason for leaving, and they'll put like fired, or they'll put like left for better job. And then you're looking at the application, there was no better job. Or they'll say, I left because I wasn't making enough money. And then they like were unemployed for a year. And so I kept thinking, like, how is it that I can get them to see that this is not what you do? Because when you tell people, like, don't write conflict with supervisor, I've heard it because like taught, and they'll go, well, maybe that's what happened. Like they're doubting your expertise. That how do I get them to see what I see without me telling them? Like, how do I get them to learn it? And so it's always through participatory activities in my mind, and get them to be in the role of the employer. So what I did was I filled out 8 applications. You know, I made up different names, just like Miguel and Michael. Only these are applications where they had to write their work history and all of that kind of stuff. And I made it all up. And then I made them a business. I created a business that was sort of like a combination Starbucks, a TJ Cinnamon. And you're like the owner or the store manager, and you got to hire a customer service rep, whatever. Here are the 8 applications. You only can interview 3, pick out which 3. And then what we could do is have a discussion of, why didn't you pick these other 5? And they'd go, well, that one said conflict with supervisor. Well, that person, they job hopped all over the place. Like, they don't seem like they could get a job, that they could keep a job. And so then what they were able to see is what I already know, which is employers are not going to pick these people. Then we can have a discussion about what is it that you need to do on your application. What is it that you need to do on your resume, your cover letter, like job interviewing questions? Like, what I could not find and is materials that weren't just like, you know, how to. I wanted materials that show, that demonstrate, that help people to see what it's like to be in the employer's role. Because I think that once you understand that, that you're looking at this whole thing from the employer's perspective, it changes their responses. Like when I was doing these interviews with these high school seniors, just, well, it was a year ago now, I guess we do it every December. I asked them, like, tell me what your weakness is. And they'd been to these classes where they were prepared for an interview before they bring in like outsiders to actually do mock interviews. These high school seniors were saying to me, like, what's your weakness? And they go, well, my weakness really is motivation. It's like, because I want to hire somebody who's unmotivated. Or they say, my weakness is that I like to procrastinate stuff. And what I realize is they're not looking at this at all from the employer's perspective. I mean, I like did a timeout and said, hey, we got to talk about like what would be a better answer. What employer wants to hire somebody who procrastinates, et cetera. And that is what I see even with the court administrator, even with the engineers, even with the architects. It's like they're always thinking about it from their own perspective. And so I just wish there were more resources on how to teach people from the employer's perspective and not ours.
Great, thank you, Jody. I did want to, it is 11:30. I did want to wrap us up by saying that I put in the chat our follow-up survey. You will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with that same information in it, but while this webinar is fresh in your mind, if you have 5 minutes out of your workday before the lunch hour, if you could take that survey and provide us with some feedback. We're getting some great feedback in the chat for you, Jody. Someone says, I love this webinar focused on interviews, cover letters, and resumes. We should have more of this content. We also had someone say that they think this is a great webinar. We realize that we want to be respectful of people's time. And we know there were, a couple questions that we didn't get answered, but you can feel free to ask those in that follow-up survey. And I can always follow up with Jody to get her perspective.
And my email address is up on the slide.
Yes, absolutely. That too. I
You
love
can
it.
email me. I will you could probably tell. I'll talk your ear off. You could call me. You can email. We can set up an appointment. I'll talk to you ad nauseum. What I do.
Well, we
And
appreciate
I want, if to me, if it helps somebody who is seeking a job, I'm all over it, because that is my total passion, is helping people move on to something that puts money in their pocket. It's what I've spent my entire career on. So don't overlook, just email me directly too.
Amazing. Yeah. And then we had Candace said that this was by far the best webinar. Please do one for the right side of the resume page, increasing outreach to employers. So that's definitely something we could explore and look into with Jody, Candace. And also, I had someone ask if they will get confirmation of attendance. We don't offer certificates or anything like that as of right now, but if you would like one, you can email us at icsps@lstu.edu. I'm going to put that in the chat now. And you can request a certificate of participation if that's something you need.
And also I have, because I teach this year-long course, I have certificate. I mean, they're ones I'll email to people. But I already have a format for it, and I could insert if somebody needs it for evidence or CEU, or, well, it's not CEU, but if somebody needs that, they can also email me and ask me for it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jody. So with that, I just want to reiterate that this is recorded and you can access that in the on the website that I put in the chat. And you'll also have that same website and the follow-up survey emailed out to you tomorrow, right at 10 a.m. So after 24 hours, and you can access the recording and all the presentation materials. Thank you so much for attending this morning. Thank you for taking the time to learn from Jody with us. This has been amazing content, both her session today, and she actually did a session last week as well. And you can access that recording if you weren't able to attend last week on the same website that we've put in the chat. So with that, any final thoughts, Jody? Thank you so much.
Just happy holidays, and everybody be safe. Don't do anything silly. I hope that I get an opportunity to talk to you guys again.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jody. Everyone have a great Wednesday. Happy holidays. Stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.